So here's something you don't usually think about when you think about printers. You think speed. You think quality. Maybe wireless printing. Maybe scanning if it's an all-in-one. But almost nobody really thinks about paper handling. And that's kind of funny, because it's one of the biggest factors in how annoying a printer feels to use day to day. Because if you've ever been in the middle of a print job and suddenly had to stop everything, just to refill the paper tray, you already know the problem. And that's where this comes in. This is the optional lower paper tray for compatible Brother printers, specifically the LT330CL expansion tray. And on the surface, it doesn't look like much. It's literally just more paper capacity. But in practice, it changes the way your printer fits into your workflow. Now, I know, talking about a paper tray doesn't exactly sound exciting. But stick with me, because this is one of those small upgrades that only makes sense after you've lived with it for a bit. Out of the box, most standard printers give you one main tray. And that's fine for light use. A few pages here and there, occasional printing, no big deal. But the moment you start printing more consistently, whether that's documents for work, school assignments, invoices, reports, that single tray starts to feel like a bottleneck. You're constantly checking paper levels. You're interrupting jobs. You're reloading stacks of paper more often than you want to admit. And it breaks the flow. What this lower paper tray does is simple. It doubles down on capacity and lets you load a second stack of paper underneath the main unit. So instead of constantly feeding the printer, you're just letting it run. And that sounds small, but the experience difference is real. Once installed, your printer feels less like a device you manage and more like infrastructure. You send a job, and it just handles it. Multiple pages, multiple jobs, less interruption, less friction. And installation? Honestly straightforward. It's designed to slot right under compatible printers without needing any deep configuration or complicated setup process. It's one of those attach it and forget it accessories, which is exactly what you want from something like this. But the bigger question is, who is this actually for? Because if you're only printing occasionally, this is probably overkill. You won't feel the benefit enough to justify it. But if you're in an environment where printing is consistent, small office, home office, shared workspace, this starts to make a lot more sense. It reduces downtime in a way that doesn't sound dramatic, but absolutely adds up over weeks and months. And that's really the theme here. It's not about adding new features. It's about removing tiny points of friction that you stop noticing once they're gone. There's also something interesting about how this changes your mental load. When you stop thinking about paper, even just slightly, printing becomes closer to what it should be, a background task, not something you actively manage. And that's where accessories like this quietly justify themselves. Because nobody buys a printer thinking about trays. But people end up appreciating them when they realize how often they interrupt their workflow. Now, I'm not going to pretend this is some revolutionary piece of hardware. It's not. It's a tray. It holds paper. That's it. But in the same way that a bigger fuel tank doesn't change how car drives, it changes how often you have to stop using it. And sometimes that's the more important metric. So if you're already in the ecosystem of compatible Brother printers and you find yourself constantly refilling paper or managing print jobs in batches, this is one of those upgrades that quietly makes life smoother without asking for anything in return. No learning curve. No setup stress. Just more capacity. And sometimes, that's exactly what you need. So yeah, it's not flashy, but it is functional. And in the world of office tech, functional usually wins. If you're thinking about picking it up, the link is in the description.